indicated an ongoing cost of $577,000. Yet, during our deliberations over the past years, during the COVID era, I always understood that the ongoing cost was about $1 million a year, and so I'm just wondering how the difference has arisen. And before you answer that question, I'll add the other question, and that is, does that figure, or any figure you give me, including the costs that I think would be left behind in this establishment, personnel, marketing? I mean, we don't get rid of staff here because we don't have Splash Planet. So are you able to confirm that and maybe give me a bit of a figure as to what costs might be left behind?
Deputy Chief Executive, Mr. Allen, I'll ask you to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. The 577,000 referenced in paragraph 5.1 relates to the additional cost to the ratepayer over and above what is currently contributed. So the $577,000 is, if we don't close, obviously there won't be revenue received through the summer. The current budgets assume that there is revenue that helps contribute to those costs. The second part of your question around, I guess, Splash Planet's contribution towards overheads, there is a sizable allocation of overheads to Splash Planet, and you're quite right that just by closing Splash Planet and not having that there doesn't necessarily make a material difference to the overhead structure of the organisation, and those overhead costs would generally stay and have to be absorbed by other activities if Splash Planet wasn't.
So could I just sort of add to the question I've already asked, just for a bit more detail, because I didn't fully appreciate that the costs already budgeted remain, and this is an additional cost effectively. So we could be talking, what, $1.5 million, $2 million ongoing costs with no benefit because we might not have a park. Is that right?
I haven't got the total costs at hand, but certainly we'll be adding $577,000 to the current cost of operating Splash Planet.
And that was, I'm sure that was about $1 million.
I'd have to verify that for you, Councillor, but I think the key thing with this is that it's the additional $577,000 through your worship.
I misread it. That's very illuminating.
Thank you very much. Councillor Butto.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've just got a few questions around I recognise that the cost will likely increase as some of the recommendations here, and I've just got a few questions around that. The first one would be the current cost of Splash Planet is $32. What is the pricing policy when it comes to what we charge at the gate?
Who would like to answer that? Is that you, Tom?
I probably, through your worship,
okay, thank you.
Just cover that off broadly. Councils have to have, as part of their long-term plan development, a revenue and financing policy. That policy sets out how that activity is to be funded, whether it be from user charges or from rates. What is the public benefit of that activity? So over a number of iterations, over a number of long-term plans, the revenue and financing policy, and Splash Planet's part of that, has dictated how much of the Splash Planet activity is recovered from user charges and how much of it's covered from rates. That hasn't necessarily been a true market assessment of what the cost should be, and really the increases in costs at the gate charge for Splash Planet has incrementally increased over time. I think it's probably timely that we do a more formal assessment of what that pricing is.
Thanks for that.
Councillor Butto?
In addition to that, so that means we are not formally running Splash Planet as a business looking for profit. It's more of a facility that's subsidised by the ratepayer to provide something for Hawke's Bay with some recovery of cost.
Through your worship, that would be a good summary of how council operates Splash Planet. It's very much recognised that Splash Planet has an economic benefit to Hastings and the broader Hawke's Bay economy and tourism sector, and as such, there's a ratepayer component towards the cost of running it.
Do we understand what the impact of an increase in cost will be on the patronage of Splash Planet?
Consideration being taken?
Yeah, through your worship. We constantly monitor the pricing and how reactive the visitation levels are to the pricing. We put the price up by about $2 last season, and it didn't really show any impact. Obviously, the weather over the last season was probably the more impactful thing for visitation, but there wasn't much objection to the price increase.
Thanks for that. Going forwards, I'd love to have a workshop around what our KPIs are for Splash Planet, what our goals are for the facility going into the future. And just as a final question, do we have something we can tell the public should the back of the park be closed in terms of what they could be excited to see in the park over the next summer?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So obviously, I think we do need to manage the expectation that this is a essential works that we're looking towards here. Although some of those essential works will uplift the experience at the park. We're talking about renewing the go-karts to a modern, better looking model, which will be lighter, better handling, better experience. We're looking to provide a two-seated model, which a parent can experience with a child, which they can't currently do. As part of the recommendation, there's also work to activate the front area at the park next to Grove Road, which is essentially the kind of shop face of Splash Planet. And the hope is that through that work, there'll be more movement into that area. It'll be a bit more vitalised. It'll be lifted. At the moment, it's a bit kind of low use, and it doesn't look that great. It's been kind of run down over the years. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Your Worship. In deciding whether it would remain open or closed, I'm interested to know how much of that economic benefit there is to the region. Is there a rough figure that could be given to us?
Analysis has been undertaken at all over the years?
Through Your Worship. Yes, I'm trying to find where it is in the paper, but there was an economic impact assessment that was performed in 2021, which indicated around 17.5 million flow back to the region, to Hawke's Bay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor Fowler.
Yep. Thank you, Your Worship. Between options, through Your Worship, between options 1 and 2, how confident are you of the work being done for opening time in November?
Thank you, Worship. So the recommended option is a lower risk option with regards to completion. There's obviously many different elements to the work that we're doing. Some present higher risk than others. To kind of really highlight the high risk areas, one is the supply of the go-karts that are coming from overseas. We're having to ship them from Germany, so that's probably the highest risk. The rest of it, we're, notification from contractors that the work can be done. Okay.
Councillor Sholham.
Thank you, Worship. 2 questions, if I may. I'm interested to understand the quantum that we're looking at potentially loan funding for these essential works. I see that we're looking at that over a 10-year period. Is that correct? Are we confident that the works we're about to do will allow us to stay open for a 10-year period? What I'm kind of trying to get at is whether or not there's any other deferred costs that we need to be thinking about as well that may need to be loan funded down the track as well. Just trying to paint a more complete picture of the needs of Splash to keep it operational as it stands.
Through Your Worship, to answer the first part of that question, we have identified, so Council's current Treasury policy position is that debt-funded assets are repaid over a life of 25 years. That's generally noting that when we debt fund assets are of a longer lifespan, and typically that's infrastructure that we're looking at in doing that. When we look at the investments that we need to make here to enable Splash to open for next summer and beyond, generally they're not of assets of that period. So we've looked at trying to reduce, so balancing between reducing the period of the debt repayment to a period of time that allows for that debt to be repaid through user charges, and then the life of those assets. So I think one of the key things that we're looking at with this is that this investment in Splash Planet is for a couple of outcomes. One is to enable the Splash Planet to open for the summer and beyond, and also to allow council time to do the more fuller, detailed strategic planning work that is required to enable Splash Planet to be invigorated into the future, in whatever shape or form that may be. So the 10-year loan payment period that's been defined in the report is a bit of a balancing act between creating a debt repayment and a financing cost that can be recovered through user charges, and acknowledging that the assets that it's funding are not infrastructure assets with generally long lives.
Thank you for that. I guess my question is really around, because we're looking at user charges to cover this debt repayment, I'm looking for a bit of confidence that we will be allowed to be able to be open for that 10-year period to recover it through user charges.
Through your worship, that is a risk. So if you could shorten down that repayment period, obviously the financing costs would be higher, and we'd be looking at a higher increase at the gate to recover that. And I guess there's a choice that council has at that point around whether that's fully recovered at the gate from user charges, or an increase in ratepayer funding. Officers have made an assumption in the report that the investments that are being incurred at this point are recovered through user charges, not an additional imposition on the ratepayer.
Thank you. And my second question, through you, Your Worship, follows on from Councillor Dixon's question around staffing. So I took away from your answer before that you're looking at a more integrated staff approach across our aquatics facilities. I think the thing that I'm looking for a little bit of confidence around is that if we do open Splash, we're not going to be sacrificing a wide range of community aquatics facilities if we have to redeploy staff. We had a little bit of that last season, and I'm just looking for a little bit of confidence around that, because those community facilities are very important as well.
Yes, really, through you, Your Worship. You know, the intention is to recruit for all of our facilities and run them throughout the season. There is a risk in staffing, you know, throughout the season. Even if we get to a start point where we've got enough staff, sickness, attrition, all this sort of stuff, then we might have to prioritise at some point throughout the season, you know, which ones we open and which ones we don't. But the intention will be from the start to recruit enough staff. You know, we're taking part of the option is to try and reduce the headcount, you know, and mitigate the risk somehow.
Is there a follow-up through you, Your Worship? Is there I guess, a priority order on which staff are redeployed? I guess I'm trying to understand what is the flow-on effect if we need to, if we choose to open Splash, we need to keep it manned. And so what is the flow-on effect if we do find we need to redeploy staff because we can't quite get the staffing numbers we need for the full season?
Yes, so through you, Your Worship, last season we had an escalation as such of how we do that, and that involved, you know, if we had excess staffing, then we would ask them to move between sites, management acting down, and then we had essentially a prioritisation which went from during the opening season, you know, how busy those individual facilities are. So it actually led to the indoor facilities, which aren't as busy during the summer, being closed first, then the you know, Frimley and Havelock as the recreation pools, and putting Splash Planet at the top of that hierarchy. You know, I'm happy to come back and discuss whether that's the right way or not.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up question from me. The shortage of temporary workforce that everybody is struggling with at the moment, and moving the dry rides and experience to the front part of the park, and has any consideration been, now that we will have an area of the park that could be a all-round year usage, has any consideration been given to that we had a team employed full-time for Splash Planet to look at the dry areas being open all year round? Was that the next steps?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, that is a next steps question. Yes. Yeah.
I accept that. We'll be following up with the next steps. Lovely. Councillor Apatu.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is in relation to, as governors, can we be reassured that our health and safety obligations will be met through option one or investing into Splash Planet?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, you can be assured that all the works that need to be done and that will be done up to opening will address the health and safety issues.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of bits of information that are not in the report. The financial analysis is really just on the options in front of us, but can you just confirm what was the turnover for last year and the profit or loss of the venue, please?
Through you, Your Worship. I don't have the figures in front of me at the moment. Don't have the end numbers. I can give an indication of turnover.
Yes, an indication of turnover is good. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, so about 1.6 mil against a budget of 1.3, so we actually still did more revenue than we were expecting to in the budget.
Thank you. And supplementary, the busiest day, how many people were in attendance?
Yeah, through you, Worship. So the busiest day last season was about 4,500.
Thank you. If we are reducing the land size of the area, will the facility still be able to cope with those numbers, not necessarily just in the user experience, but also from a health and safety aspect, more people potentially in water, eyes and stuff, the observations and stuff?
Through you, Your Worship. So the plan this season will be to cap visitation levels to about 3,000, give or take. We are, if we choose to pursue that, the recommended option, we do believe there's enough space in the park for that level of visitation. The 3,000 is still well above average visitation. We do have obviously those really kind of hot days where we get a spike, but the majority of the days will be much less.
Is there an opportunity to, therefore, on some of the, maybe of an extension of hours?
For you, Your Worship, yes, so the extension of hours is a challenging one operationally. We work to an 8-hour day for the staff, so if we increase the hours, we're almost looking at doubling our workforce, because you're going to have to get the same amount of people in again for running the park in a safe way. So it's quite a challenging one, increasing hours, but I do recognise that there's a...
At the 3,000 number, how does that impact the Ngāti Kahungunu AGM days?
So, through your chair, the ticket sales via Ngāti Kahungunu were under 3,000 this season, although the visitation on the day was over, because we do open up the park to the public on the same day. So we can deal with the visitation from that group, but it might limit the amount of access to the public.
Okay, thank you. And just one last one. We talk about the economic value of 17.5 million, which was done in 2021, which is, significant for the region, and we've put this paper together to make a call on whether we invest on some important maintenance. Have you had any feedback from Tourism Hawke's Bay, or those within the tourism sector, around, hey, please, can you make sure that this facility is open in time for summer?
Through you, Your Worship, we haven't had any direct feedback.
Thank you.
Does Hawke's Bay Tourism help with the marketing of Splash Banner?
Thank you, Your Worship. We expect this feature on their website.
On their website. Okay then, thank you very much. Councillor Harvey, thank you. Councillor Nepi?
Kia ora tātou. Through the chair, my question is, we know that Splash Banner has suffered from staffing issues. My question is, even with the recent high numbers of applicants for employment, why would staffing still be an issue?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, seasonal staffing is always a challenge. It's a competitive area. There's got a high level of tourism in the area. Lots of businesses like to size up, so it does become quite competitive on pay rates. Also, student staffing. So, there's a lot of the staffing issues actually came about at the end of the season, when students were returning to university, so this is why we had to kind of close the doors early, because we had enough staff, just about enough staff throughout the season, but then the real pressure came when they started to, return to where the university is.
Thank you. Councillor Jessup.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is about providing hospitality inside Splash Planet, because when we bring our manuhiri to go in, and we usually hire a barbecue. So my question is, what sort of facility, well, if that's taken away because of health and safety, what other sort of facility could we be open to? And if we can we bring in our barbecues? I'll leave it with you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're still working through some of the health and safety implications and what's going to be on offer in the park this season, so I would like to give a kind of formal answer on that at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if staff can possibly jog my memory. Do we have a formal resolution anywhere from council requesting us to move forward with a phased master plan for Splash and maybe an operational review? Because if not, I'm just wondering if today is an opportunity to look at formalising something.
You have a work program for Splash Planet through both strategy and policy and performance and monitoring?
Through Your Worship, not a formal work program set down for those two committees. So if council was to be of a mind to set that, then the officers would take that on board and implement it.
Thank you, Councillor Sholem. I'll leave you with that one. Excellent. Okay, thank you, councillors. No further questions. We move now into debate. We've got A to F recommendations on page 7 and 8. And I'd like to focus your attention on those recommendations, and starting with Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. It's no secret this was a horrible summer. It started off badly in November. It continued badly through most of December. I think January sort of picked up a little bit, and then we got hit with a cyclone. Yet despite that, we actually got 100,000 visitors there. I think that's an exceptional performance, to be honest, in the circumstances. The staffing issues, I think, maybe part of that can be traced back to the fact we were closed the year before with the COVID shutdown. And so we failed to get that continuity of employment, people coming back year after year. And I'm sure that played a part. And because we've been open this year, I would expect it to be maybe less troublesome if we open again next season. On top of that, I think the economic situation means that there could be a few more people, looking for casual work over the summer. So I think the staffing thing will sort of, if not go away, at least subside a little. What we've got to take into account is this is an iconic Hastings feature. It attracts people. If you see the school kids that come in by the busloads in that pre-Christmas period as rewards for their road safety activities and all the rest of it, it attracts people from out of the area. It's something to do in Hastings. It's a very important thing to go to Splash Planet, take your visitors there and so on. And I think from a cost point of view, we're not going to save nearly as much by shutting it down as we might be thinking. Just based on the figures given by Deputy Chief, to me, we could be left with a couple of $1 million of costs against maybe spending $500,000 or so to keep it running. So I would like to move the recommendation, with enthusiasm. Thank you.
Have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Butto.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd be in favour of the recommended option 1, which is opening with a reduced footprint for the coming year. To me, having studied economics, one of the principles was that if your income is higher than your variable costs, your business should stay open and you should continue going because you're offsetting some of your fixed costs. And on that basis, I think that Splash Planet should remain open, along with everything that Councillor Nixon has mentioned around the community benefits, the benefits to the wider region. We might be saving money by keeping it open for the coming year.
Thank you, Councillor Butto. Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, the officers have given a solution or an option one to keep Splash Planet going. I believe the community would not forgive us if we closed it. Will we have an option to keep it going? So we need to get into the life raft, and some of you might have heard me say that before, and keep afloat. And in terms of the council would be looking at plans going forward for Splash Planet and any other assets that we own to make sure that we're on top of these situations.
Councillor Fowler. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I also support option 1 with a view to option 2 for the 24-25 season coming into perspective. I also would like to recall last year when I visited the Splash, there were 4 busloads that travelled down from Gisborne to actually give their children from Gisborne an iconic view of what was happening in the Splash Park. So if they can come down from Gisborne for one day and return, then we've got to keep this place open.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to foreshadow a motion. I understand there's a motion already on the table, which is actually the motion that's on the table, but with a addition, which would be G. I'm hoping that potentially Mr. Cameron can help me with the wording here because it may not be accurate. But along the lines of that a phased master plan and operational model review be included in the LTP, if that's appropriate, or it may be that it's not appropriate as part of the LTP. So looking for a little bit of guidance there.
Through Madam Chair, you could address that as an amendment to the motions if the mover and seconders were okay with that, if that's the process you want to follow. And I can just go off the side with the member and draft some suitable wording if that's what you'd like me to do.
Comfortable with that direction, Councillor Sholem?
If the mover and the seconder are, yes.
Councillor Nixon is concerned. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Thank you.
I'll go prepare some.
We'll just scope up those words to add to that recommendation. And for me, I'd like to have this as a work stream, both as in strategy and looking at the future of Splash Planet, but also to look at the performance and monitoring as we track through this period. And I think that it's absolutely critical that we have an agenda on performance and monitoring as to how costs are tracking and how we are managing updates on staffing, trying to acquire temporary staff to get the season open, and some of the recommendations that are here to delegate to the Chief Executive, but governance table having an overview and oversight on how we are tracking. So if you're comfortable with that, mover and seconder, I think it's really critical that we both look to the future and we also look to how we monitor what we are spending on now and how our season is tracking. I have any other speakers? No. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I've got a question.
Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. Part of the investment is ordering some go-karts from Germany. What's what's plan B if they don't arrive in time? Is it that at some end, so if plan B was that they could be installed when they do arrive halfway through the season, is that possible or not? Is it?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we won't be able to put the old carts back in operation, so it will be waiting for the new ones to come. The indication from the supplier is that given direction this week, they can be on a boat and shipped prior to September, which should give hopefully enough time for them to be in and be installed. And if they come later, after the opening date of the season, then it will be get them installed and get them up and running as soon as possible.
Sorry. How confident are you that they're going to be a good experience?
I haven't tried them. sorry for you. Obviously, they're a modern cart. They're a good quality cart. We've done a bit of research. I think the added experience of the dual cart ride is something that we've been looking for. And that was one of the real kind of the options that brought us to this one. They're lighter, so handling and that sort of stuff should be better. So as far as on paper, they look good, but having not tried them, can't test them too.
Tom, do you have an understanding of most, out of all of our visitors to Splash Planet, what are our most popular attractions?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. We did survey in 2021.
Yes.
Go-karts, as far as a dry ride, is the most popular attraction. Actually, second to the train. The train's the most popular attraction.
Wow.
But percent between the two. And then, as far as all of the attractions, the Lazy River.
Lazy River, yeah. Great, thank you. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Worship. Just while that was being crafted, another thought came to mind. I wonder if we can possibly take away an action from today's meeting that may be a workshop around aquatics prioritisation and furthering that, just to get a really good understanding of how Splash works within the ecosystem of the others. I realise the review's been going on. I think it's really critical timing, especially if we do find ourselves in a situation where we have to redeploy staff at the end of the season again, and just understanding the impact on community facilities.
Follow-up workshop. I think that take that as an action. Thank you. And we've got performance. When's the next performance monitoring? July. Okay. Thank you. Well, we're going to have that as a standing item on the agenda too, so we'll be able to get updates on how we're tracking. Okay, so we've got an extra recommendation there. Is everybody comfortable with that recommendation as it stands? Mover and seconder? Yes. Thank you. Would the mover wish to have a right of reply? Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, yes, I don't need to say any more. I think
Great.
I've already spoken enough.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Councillor Harvey?
Thank you. Is G definitive enough? Calling for a review to inform a future master plan that may be considered.
Sorry, Mr. Cameron.
Through you, Madam Chair, the council can't impose a future decision on the council in 2024 as to what you're going to adopt in your LTP. That'll be considered by the council at the time. So we can prepare the review and recommendations to go into the LTP process, but that will be up to the council at the time to debate and adopt.
Yeah, I think that perhaps Councillor Harvey, what he's mentioning though that isn't captured up there is that we're not monitoring what happens with this. If we allocate this budget today, how we're monitoring its spend and how it's tracking. And I don't think that, so this is talking about review of future and LTPs, but we actually need to be looking at this. So I think we just...
No, I think that, sorry, through you, I think they're actually two separate things. One is actually monitoring whether the stuff that we're agreeing to today actually does take place to the timeframes that we're hoping, which that it opens in November. So that's one aspect that I don't think is actually caught. Well, maybe it is in order to open for Splash Planet 2023-24, maybe that needs to be part of C. But no, my question was more around, it seems a little bit wishy-washy, to be honest, G.
Through Madam
It's
Chair.
not
Sorry, Mr
definitive
Cameron,
enough.
thank you.
Through Madam Chair, G was addressing the proposed amendment that Councillor Scholem proposed. I believe Councillor Harvey is talking about a different matter, so you may wish to
No,
incorporate.
I'm not.
Okay, so we just need to be clear here. We need G.
It sounds like you are requesting an additional amendment. G is to reflect the amendment proposed by Councillor Scholem.
What I'm worried about with G as it stands is that we're going to potentially do quite a bit of work in a review to a master plan that actually doesn't even get pushed through to the long-term plan.
Through your worship, and just following on Mr Cameron's point, I think the commitment that we can make at this point in time is to undertake the work around the master planning that will inform the LTP. To Mr Cameron's point, it will be a decision of council at that time as to whether the recommendations as part of that master planning work are actually incorporated within the long-term plan from a budgetary sense and a priority setting sense. I think in the context of what this council was working through with the current environment, there will be a number of priorities at play when council considers its long-term planning work. So I think we can do the work to understand what the future may look like, what the future investments may look like, and we can put recommendations to council for its inclusion into the long-term plan. But I think that's about as far as we can commit future councils to any decision making.
Thank you. So Councillor Harvey, are you comfortable with the direction? Or would you like to ask the mover if they would like to add an amendment to one of those C or Ds? Because I understand what you're trying to capture, and it could be taken as an action if you are comfortable with that approach, which is that work stream of Splash Planet, performance and monitoring.
Yeah, would Mr Cameron like to draft something up that we can look at in relation to?
So we want a recommendation rather than an action.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could I just have a minute to clarify what Councillor Harvey is after? And then
Well, it was actually Mayor Sandra that also was suggesting in one way or other as well that we're making sure that there is a monitoring and performance aspect to the works that we are going to be undertaking.
So it's monitoring the $1.4 million works program and reporting back to council on how it's tracking.
So through your worship, and thank you, Mr Thu. I think Councillor Harvey, if we make an addition to recommendation C, which just at the end of that notes the monitoring component of that work and through performance and monitoring committee. So it's just a slight addition to recommendation C, Mr Cameron.
So, Mover, are you comfortable with that addition?
Yes, except for one thing. I mean, it's a facility that's open for less than 6 months of the year. Do we need to have a quarterly review? I mean, I agree with Councillor Harvey, but it's just a small point, but it hardly seems necessary to keep reviewing something that's just going to be repeat all the time.
I think the purpose, through Madam Chair, the purpose of the reviewing at the moment, in the first instance, is the investments that are required between now and opening. So what officers are committing to do through performance and monitoring is keep council abridged of progress, and the risks that are associated with, getting
I
all the work done on
misinterpreted
time.
that. That's good, I understand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so everyone comfortable, mover and seconder? Thank you. All right, so we've captured all of that, and I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you, that was very good debate and a good direction. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to item 6. Item 6 is included, and I'd like to move from the chair that Councillor Kelly Jessup attends the 2023 Local Government Conference, AGM. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Nixon. Any questions or comments? Thank you. I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you, team. Item 7. This is the Hawke's Bay Regional Sports Park car parking and access way investments. And I'll hand over to you, Deputy Chief Executive, Mr. Allen, to take us through this paper.
Thank you, Ms. Sandra. So this report is at the request of council from the Performance and Monitoring Committee last week, where they requested that a previous decision of council be altered. So this is the following council standing orders, the process for bringing that back for council's reconsideration. The element in question was the investment in car parking that was to be included in the 23-24 annual plan of $1.5 million. Previously had a condition that it would be released upon the merger of the two trusts. It's been a request that council reconsider that part of the motion and remove that condition so that work can get underway, noting its importance at the park. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Thank you. I'm just happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you. Have a seconder. Councillor Apatu? Thank you. Councillor Nixon?
Yeah, this is, I don't have to stand. This, oh yes, I do, yeah. I was thinking we're in the next bit. The concern I have is that there are other transport options. And so the question I've got is, what effort has been made or what consideration has been given to looking at the alternative transport arrangements such as public transport, cycling, walking, because it's a lot of money and it adds more cars into the roads and everything else. And in the workshop we had last week, I think it was a workshop, I don't recall any useful information being provided on these alternatives at that point.
I understand there's some work being done through the Regional Transport Committee on public transport options to the Regional Sports Park. Could somebody update me on that, please?
Through your worship, not specifically on that, but it was referenced by the Chief Executive of the Sports Park when he presented performance and monitoring last week that some work had been done and they were working with the bus arrangements. And I think he did make comment about a number of schools or school children who utilise the park actually biking to the park. So I think there's a lot of work that they can do in that space. I think it's probably fair to say that the car parking, the access into the sports park on a Saturday morning can be probably politely referred to as chaotic at the moment, and a strategic investment into improving that through the flows of traffic and the parking arrangements would be very useful, particularly in reference to, I guess, ensuring that the park is a safe place to visit.
Thank you. And we just see the Regional Sports Park.
No, I'll speak to it later.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buddo?
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand that the merger of the two entities or trusts involved has been, the council has been in favour of that for a fairly long time at this point. What assurances have we had that this merger is being worked at pace?
There was an MOU signed for a merger to be undertaken of one trust for the Regional Sports Park, but the time frame is not immediate. So at the moment, working with both chairs of trusts to look at bringing forward the merger in a more timely manner than what was presented in the MOU. But just because the extent and the growth that we've experienced at the regional sports park has occurred much faster than what was ever considered when those documents were drawn up. Councillor Shodham?
Thank you, Your Worship. I recall that one of the motivations behind encouraging the trust to merge was so that a comprehensive spatial plan could be done of the grounds and ensure a somewhat less ad hoc development approach was taken to the overall grounds. Can the spatial plan proceed without the merger?
Through Your Worship, yes it can. I think part of the sort of joint decision between council and the two trusts at the time when it was decided to slow down or pause the spatial planning work was acknowledging that it would be useful to have a single entity to drive the vision and the implementation of that spatial plan once it was brought together. So that was part of the reason. It was sort of acknowledged and became quite clear through the development of the spatial plan that actually having one single trust at the sports park would certainly help provide clear direction moving forward. So, but to say that yes, we could do the spatial plan with two trusts. The preference was to get the two trusts together before we did that final piece of work.
Thank you. The reason I asked the question is obviously the initial resolution was designed to motivate council-used funds to see a better outcome, which is the merger of the two trusts and then ideally a wonderful spatial plan. I am a little concerned that removing that requirement takes some of the pressure off. However, I do understand as well there's a great deal of need for the parking as well. I'd be quite keen to see an amendment made to see it makes note of continued support for a potential merger of the two trusts, but I also want to, I'd like to see reiterated in the need for a spatial plan as well. Whether that's before or after the merger, that's fine. I just wonder as well if there's any mechanism we've got in order to say this is it until there's some progress in this area, because I am concerned that council funds continue to be used in a rather ad hoc way rather than a really strategic way. Any thoughts on that?
So through Your Worship, I think that there is we can certainly make a note that and add to C, noting the spatial plan work that the council's desire is for that to be achieved so that the park can be further developed in a more programmed and strategic way, and that probably be appropriate to add into C going forward. I think one of the things and the chair of the Regional Sports Park Trust, when he presented the performance and monitoring last week, I think he made it reasonably clear that that trust was in favour of bringing the two trusts together. The way that the arrangements at the sports park are, the development of additional car parking and traffic flows is certainly at the benefit of the Regional Sports Park Trust and the assets and services that it provides rather than the Community Fitness Centre Trust. So I think putting any imposition or slowing it down is more detrimental to the Regional Sports Park Trust and the users than it is to the Community Fitness Centre Trust.
Thank you for that clarification. We'll be interested in the future around how we can motivate the other trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sholem. Is there an opportunity to do a letter of expectation under the statement of intent, but I mean, it's just how, how we could go back. Council would like to progress with the spatial plan and see this work continue, preferably under one trust arrangement or something like that.
Through Your Worship, we can certainly reiterate the letter that you wrote to both the trusts last year and to help reinvigorate that conversation around bringing the two trusts together.
Thank you. Happy to take that as an action if others are comfortable with that. Councillor Nixon?
Am I able to speak to the motion at this stage? Have we finished questions? Yes. Yeah, okay. It's the issue I raised before in questions about the provision of other means of transport. Now, there's nobody more supportive of providing adequate car parking to anything than me. But yeah, we're talking $1.5 million, which is a significant expense. And on top of that, we hear ad nauseum in Osley the need to find out, more environmentally friendly ways of getting around. So we're going to provide a whole lot more car parks. I know part of it is to improve access, but I don't see the details. I'm not quite sure what that entails. And yes, I have brought up with both the regional council and the sports park year after year the need to allow for other ways of getting to and from the sports park. And I've seen no progress in that whole time. And I feel that the sports park have not actually taken it all that seriously. And so if we're sort of going to keep talking about climate change and the need to get people out of private cars into public transport and alternative transport, where's the evidence here? There is none. So I'm still trying to make up my mind whether I'm going to support or oppose the motion, but I'm not all that enthusiastic the way it is currently expressed. And I don't think enough effort has been put into looking at the alternatives. You can't catch a bus, to my knowledge, to the sports park without walking about 2 miles to get there, in a road without even a footpath.
Yeah, no, you raise very valid points, Councillor Nixon. I think we must be also very aware that the users of the park come from across the region, and significant people come from Napier to the regional sports park, and what we have seen is, Christmas in the park with 8,000 or 10,000 people there. The parking isn't sufficient and adequate to hold these really big events. Some of the national swimming championships that we've just seen recently, many of these events are significant national and regional events, not just local events. But I take your point. We want to reduce the use of cars and get more people into public transport. But I think that's a conversation as we take forward to other forums, rather than trying to manage the health and safety of the regional sports park car parking today.
Well, that is your view, your worship, but I don't totally agree. I've seen no evidence of any real effort to do something about it, such as even putting a bus stop at the end of Percival Road, which would enable people to use a bus. You can't even do that. We've done nothing, and the sports park is a great success story, but that's, in my opinion, its biggest failing.
So I think perhaps we could take that as an action
Yep.
to the regional council about how important this is to us, and what is happening with the public transport and the trial with My Way in the regional sports park as a pilot. So if we could take that as an action, would you be comfortable with that direction?
Yeah, I sure would be.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow on from Councillor Nixon, I get it as well, and there's very limited even bike stands there within the facility, but there is a massive pent-up demand. Yeah. Every Saturday there are people just parking on the grass, which is our asset, and we're wrecking that asset. So we need to get this underway. And just to Councillor Shollam's point, I do wonder whether if there was, are you looking for an amendment? Could we just bring it up? And I just wondered whether for that C it ended with the benefit to complete a sports park spatial plan.
I just wonder if anybody could advise me, who probably you, Bruce. So in terms of understanding where the car park goes and how the traffic flows and that investment, isn't there going to be required some sort of modelling or planning to undertake that piece of work to invest?
Through your worship, that's right. There has been some, like the Community Fitness Centre Trust has previously engaged experts to undertake traffic flow modelling within the park. The Regional Sports Park Trust has had a lot of design work completed around where an additional car park could go. We know that adding an exit off the end of the access way that goes down between the sports fields back down to Percival Road would help ease some congestion as cars are leaving the park. I think there's a number of things that will be looked at. releasing the funding and making the funding available from 1st of July next year and part of the annual plan enables that work to progress in the design work. I think probably one of the things that we it's not referenced here, but it's a requirement under the lease, is that council needs to approve any future development works at the park. And those conversations have been had a few times with council over the years. So we can take an action, just noting that it's a lease requirement anyway, to bring back the final designs as to how the $1.5 million is going to be spent within the park and what outcomes will be achieved from it.
Through you, Chair. I mustn't be having that great a day of articulating myself. Again, they're two separate things. Councillor Sholem has raised that a spatial plan was undertaken, it's now stalled, and we're wanting that to carry on in some way into the future, regardless of the parking issue, which is a standalone. We just want to get that underway. It's just to build on the fact of the reason, and one of the key reasons we want to look at a potential merger of those trusts is to enable that spatial plan to continue on. Is that correct?
Bring those recommendations up.
Can I ask for an amendment? I still would like to put more weight into the...
Sorry, Councillor Nixon, I think that you've spoken 3 times.
I'm not trying to speak, I'm asking a question.
Well, let's just have a look at the recommendations before us, please, and see if anything else needs to be done. We've got 2 actions. Caitlin, could you just tell me what the actions are, please?
We've got, through you, Your Worship, so we've got an action point about the letter of expectation and about one for Hawke's Bay Regional Council about how important public transport is.
Everybody hear those?
Sorry.
One is about the letter of expectation and the importance of continuing on with the spatial plan and the merger, and the other one is about the regional transport through the regional council and getting an update on how the pilot went with My Way and public transport to the sports park. Those are actions. Those aren't adding anything to the recommendations. Right. The mover, please. I'd like some direction from you.
I'm happy with that.
You happy with that? Seconder? Councillor Apatu, you comfortable with that?
Yes. Yes.
All right. No further comment or debate. I'm putting those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Thank you. Well done. That's carried.
Excellent, excellent. We got there.
Item 10, moving on. This is an item to exclude the public. Item 10. Could I have a, Mr Cameron, or sorry, Mr Allen, would you like to explain to councillors today why we would take this item away from a public agenda?
Through Your Worship, this paper requires council decision on lease negotiations, and through the commercial realities of that, we should discuss it, or it's recommended that you discuss it in public excluded.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Have a mover, please. Councillor Watkins, second Councillor Butto. No further questions. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you for anyone who's joined us today at our council meeting, and we now go into a public excluded part to manage some commercial lease with council. Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to the staff and councillors. Good debate and good healthy debate.